This is the second section of my interview on the Knowledge Unbound podcast with Bryan Dewsbury. In this section, we talk about what it means to be honest about teaching and what it doesn't mean.
And then just for context, you taught in Houston, 4th grade, in a high needs district, if I'm remembering correctly. And then in high school was Hialeah High School in Hialeah, Florida, which is in greater Miami-Dade County. Okay, so I'll take you back to that where you said, okay, you took several years to get to a point where you're realizing all of the hidden curriculum associated with developing these skills. And then your sister becomes a teacher as well. And so maybe there's a little bit of advice being bequeathed right, based on experience. That's what then led to See Me After Class.
Yes. So I was giving my sister this advice, this off-the-record advice that I couldn't get anyone to give to me. And by the way, there are many families of educators. And one of the things that I've found, without any data to back this up, but I've worked with teachers for 2 decades, people whose parents were teachers are so much better equipped when they first start their first teaching job.
Well, it's like first generation college students.
Yes.
Right?
I'm sure.
Versus,
yes.
Yeah, you come in with that capital.
For sure. And I think it's just because you have to have someone close enough to you that they are willing to risk telling you things about those private decisions that they've made that nobody is willing to say to teachers as a group. So I was willing to do that for my sister. And then I just found, my sister had a few roommates. I was talking to some of them about that. And then I started giving presentations at my own high school to the incoming teachers. And as I widened the circle to start, I started doing new teacher orientation speeches for the whole county eventually. It was basically the same seed of the desire to say, okay, there is a way to talk about this stuff that doesn't let teachers off the hook for what students deserve. Because I also think that there is something, I call it like the teaching sucks genre. I try to steer away from that, and I try to steer teachers away from that if they have to go into work the next day. Because yes, you can complain about the job of teaching, and you can be 100% right. There's plenty to complain about. But when we talk about being honest about teaching, I think a lot of people immediately say, yeah, let's talk about how much teaching sucks. Right? And that's not what teachers need either. You want to feel like you're in a noble profession that's one of the oldest professions of humanity that will always be with us in some form, where you can recognize another teacher from across a room of people you've never met before. It crosses all kinds of cultural and class lines. For you to meet another teacher, you immediately have things to talk about. It's something that I've always was proud to say I was a teacher. There's so much to like about teaching when it's going right. And even when it's going just okay, even when it's going badly, but you handled it well. There's so much to like about it. It's not being honest about how much teaching can suck. It's about being honest about what are the trade-offs that we never talk about, and that you need to make a decision. Then you need to be able to admit to someone that you've made the decision.
Right or wrong, right? And I guess that's one of the things that maybe I'm hoping kind of listeners take from here, because I also know, you didn't mention this, but I also know that you also don't like the hyperbole superhero narrative of teaching, like the freedom riders type of thing. And so, that's almost like one extreme. And then the teaching sucks is kind of the other extreme. And it feels like what your argument is, teaching is real life. You show up, you're human, you're trying to make relationships, you're trying to do the best with what the system gives you. And in engaging in that effort, mistakes are going to be made, there are going to be successes, and there's going to be a lot of stuff in between. And the conversation to be had about that everyday experience needs to bring in all of that in its most authentic and truthful self, which to me is a narrative that can apply to all levels of teaching. I actually thought you were going to say, when you were talking about giving advice to your sister and friends, and you woke up one day and like, wait a second, I should charge you. What the hell, man? It's like Friday evening, you all have me. All right. But the book you wrote, the first book you wrote, See Me After Class, and the subtitle is Advice for Teachers by Teachers, available Amazon, anywhere you get your books. So the Advice for Teachers by Teachers part, it's because you interviewed a lot of actual teachers.
Yes.
So talk to us about that and what sort of gave the book its special flavor because of that process.
Sure. I interviewed over 100 teachers, pretty much all anonymously. They had the choice whether they wanted to be listed in the acknowledgments, but for the most part, I tried to keep it very vague and change identifying details because I wanted people to be as honest with me as they possibly could. And then I found that after I interviewed 100 or so people, it became my job as the author to pick out the themes that I was hearing that were what I think teachers need to know that aren't being told. So there's just different chapters on probably what you would think. Grading work without hating work is the one that addresses what we talked about, but there's the classroom management chapter, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just what I think no one says, and then what I think should be said, and then stories from other teachers to give a little context.
Yeah. So is the arc of that book what informed the course that you just talked about?
So does it inform the course? I would say my career in education has been very weird. I always have trouble writing a bio for myself because the common thread of what I've always tried to do, I've written See Me After Class, and I wrote a novel that I describe as The Office, but set in an urban high school, which was trying to capture the way that teachers' personal lives and professional lives interact, and then sometimes how politics trickles down to that. And now I have courses for teachers that are meant for teachers to be able to afford to take them themselves, kind of bite-sized mini courses that are backed up by my support. That, by the way, people can find out more about at my website, which is roxanaeldon.com. But I would say that almost seems like it connects more to See Me After Class, my first book, plus all of the workshops and speaking gigs and one-on-one coaching that I did as a result of that. But the through line of my bio, and I know this because I've revised it many times, is I try to cut through the cliches that people usually use when they talk about teaching. And I try to get to something that is honest, practical, nuanced, and sometimes funny. And that is the one thing that I can say applies to every single thing that I've done since I've started talking about teaching. In the next section, we'll talk about my novel, Adequate Yearly Progress. For now, if you'd like to learn more about Bryan's podcast, Knowledge Unbound, or the bite-sized teacher courses we mentioned in this part of the interview, you'll find the links to those in the description underneath this video.